Alright, so I've spent quite a bit of time watching one of my new favorite Tarkov streamers named QuattroAce. I'm going to toss a link down in the description below, and I urge you guys to click on that link and give him a follow on Twitch, as well as check out his YouTube. He is, in my opinion, one of the best Tarkov players I have ever seen. He's a Russian streamer, extremely humble, really nice guy, speaks a bit of English, but overall is just a joy and a pleasure to watch. I actually have a few pages of actual notes that I've been taking watching him play, and I want to share what I've learned with you guys. Now, there are a lot of awesome Tarkov streamers out there, but very few of them these days, at his skill level, make me constantly wonder, what the fuck is he doing? The guy's like a machine with how he runs labs, the routes he takes, the spots he holds, and most interestingly for me, which is the impetus for this video, was how he loots. And one of the most exciting things for someone like me to experience is someone far better than you doing something that you simply don't understand. That seems counterintuitive, almost as if they might be doing something wrong. But for me, when I see someone that skilled doing something that at first blush seems like they're making a mistake, I try to take a step back and see maybe I've been doing it wrong this whole time. So outside of his extremely efficient movement and aim, the awareness and his game sense, and how he keeps his composure in all sorts of situations and takes control over engagements like nobody I've ever seen, when I watch him loot players and raiders in labs, he takes a totally different approach than I do. Now, I quickly realized that I'd gotten into the habit of looting in a very particular way without really taking the time to analyze what I was doing and how I could be doing it better. Now, I get backseated by chat all the time, telling me what to pick up versus what to keep. I have different reasons in the past for taking particular items over others, outside of simply getting the most money that I can. Sometimes it's laziness, sometimes it's, other things. But given the state of the game now compared to how it was like a year ago, the flea market, labs-driven economy, all this stuff, I've decided to take a step back, analyze what I'm doing, and see what I can learn from one of the best players in the game.
Свалил, я понял, да. ГГ. What the fuck?
Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand that value is an ambiguous concept here and can mean different things to different people. You might value one item over another if you find it cool, unique, or rare to find or loot, even though technically you could have just spent the money on it yourself from the market. That's why I get so excited when I find an RSAS. They're so rare, even though I could buy them at any time and I have the money to buy them at any time, looting them I get excited. And I have more value over finding that rare item, even though it might not be worth as much as, some alternatives. Some people value items that they'll actually use themselves over ones that they'll simply sell to traders, even if the sale price is more than the preferred item would cost to buy or assemble yourself. Time has value. Some things are easy to get but require buying a bunch of other items, to assemble the needed requirements for a trade, let's say, with a trader. Now, some people make tons of money simply by taking advantage of this, while others find it more enjoyment in using something without wanting to mess around in the menus or min-maxing the flea market. And when you try to value an item in financial terms, there's a number of ways you can look at it. Personally, if I'm looking at an item that I plan on using that I would otherwise buy myself, I'll look at the purchase price of the item, either from the vendor or the flea market, depending on where I get it from. Now, if I'm looking at an item that I never plan on using myself, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the value of the sale price to vendors or the flea market, whichever I could get more for. Now, if I find an item that I wouldn't otherwise buy, but I might actually use myself, like an interesting or unique gun build, I look at the value that I would get from actually selling it, because the alternative to me actually using this item is parting it out and selling it piece by piece, compared to actually taking it and using it. Now, if I have a slightly damaged piece of armor that I don't want, it's interesting to consider the value you get from selling it damaged versus repairing it and then selling it fully repaired with a little bit less durability. Another thing to consider regarding value is the purchase limit or availability of some items. For example, you can only get one lab's keycard per reset. So even though you can buy it from therapists once every few hours for 115,000, after that, the value is then compared to the flea market value, which tends to be somewhere from 150 to 200,000. So you got to keep all these things in mind when you're talking about value, because it's not as simple and straightforward as a lot of people think. So let's examine what QuattroAce does differently from me and compare it to how I've historically played. Now, when I kill a decked out raider, I usually get excited when I see something like a nice clean set of Gen 4 armor, a modestly modded AK, M4, or, an MDR. I get excited to pop out the mag of an MP5 and have this slim little 3x1, gun to take with me and to fit in that nice little vertical slot left in my bag. I might grab a set of swordons because I use them every raid. So I typically value a full Gen 4 over something like a rig because, the rig costs 50 to 100k. Obviously, the armor is worth more, right? If I'm paying 150 to 200k for that Gen 4. I'll stuff my Gamma container with as many expensive items as I can fit and make my way out. Now, I like that I've gotten some good gear that I'll likely use, a bunch of larger, kind of easy to Tetris and relatively high value items with a few decent extras to fill the gaps, making a bit more money in the meantime. Taking a look at my backpack, the value of all these items, selling on the market or to traders wherever makes sense, comes to around 380 if I sell everything, or 430 if I were to buy, everything, or buy the things I would use. So I would say around 400,000 rubles is the value of my backpack. Now, the backpack taking 35 slots, being a 7x5 container, this means I averaged about 12,000-ish rubles per slot. So that's not bad. Lots of people would be happy with a haul of 400k. But watching Quattro, it was clear that he focuses on different things completely. When I see this, I immediately think, oh, cool, that's a nice modded AK. Wow, a Gazelle, you don't see that often, let me grab that. Quattro focuses on things like meds, attachments, rigs, magazines, and suppressors and grenades. He doesn't get distracted by, getting an entire cool gun build or getting a set of mediocre but rare armor. It's pure value for him in many cases. Now, when I approached looting from this mindset, a bunch of honestly really obvious things jumped out at me that I really didn't think about before. And I'm hoping that this will enlighten you guys a little bit as well. Sure, an alpha rig isn't as valuable as Gen 4 when you look at how much space it takes up. I can't fit an alpha rig and a couple of other big guns in my bag if I do that. But thinking about it a bit more, why did I really want or need to fit both guns in my bag? I know that it feels cool to walk out of a raid with a bunch of guns, but if I'm attempting to maximize profits and I take a step back and see what I'm actually doing, I realize that so much of the value of the gun is in the attachments, magazines, and ammo, as well as the fact that even though the alpha rig takes up a larger footprint in my bag compared to the Gen 4, it's larger on the inside than on the outside, so it's effectively creating space for more value. The same can be said about adding many attachments to guns, as they can be added without growing the footprint of the gun itself in the inventory, but because not all guns can accept all attachments, you definitely get diminishing returns here. Now, looking at just the lootable parts from a few guns stashed in my rig, plus the rig value itself, compared to, the gun, you're looking at 11,000 rubles per slot as opposed to literally double that. Now, at this point, I can't not mention that there are other trade-offs as well that you should consider based on your playstyle. First, having all of these items broken down into 1 or 2 slot pieces means you have way more options when it comes to the Tetris that you can do to get the most bang for your buck. You have more flexibility in grabbing as many things as you can, given that you don't know what you're going to be coming across in the future. But at the same time, keep in mind that it also adds complexity to looting, requiring you moving lots of little items back and forth between containers, which can potentially get you killed. So try considering all of these things when making your looting decisions. So when filling up my bag using these techniques compared to the way I used to loot, how does the profit compare? Remember, we had about 400k gross value in the backpack before. But when selling my bag full of rigs, attachments, loose meds, grenades, and stuff like that, I ended up netting over 800,000 rubles in gross value. Fuck. The same amount of time invested and I get double the money from essentially the same possible loot pool. Are the attachments really worth more off the gun than on the gun? I mean, sometimes, but when stuffed into high-value containers themselves and then sold piecemeal, they definitely are almost all of the time. Now, in order to get a picture for how all the various items stack up value per slot-wise, I put together a visual representation of the items that I found most often from looting labs. I had originally placed all of the things like rigs and backpacks onto the list, but when I was trying to represent them in a fair way, it was kind of impossible because they don't exactly have a per slot value in the same way that other items do. Does a backpack actually take up 0 slots technically if it's 7x5 on the inside and the outside? You can't really divide by 0, so it's effectively infinite value. It's even weirder when you look at items that have more internal space than external space, like rigs in some bags that seem to violate all sorts of, laws of video game entropy. Now, quickly after putting this graph together, before I really spent much time making it look less shitty, I realized it's horrible for a bunch of other reasons. But primarily because the value of the LEDX and vertex per slot throws off the y-axis so much that the rest of the data isn't really consumable at all. So let's just throw that in the trash and make something a bit more readable. I'm going to toss this image up on my website underneath my infographic that I've made that many of you are familiar with at www.veritas.wtf/Tarkov. But please, please, please keep in mind that the values fluctuate so much that it's important to know that you can't come back to this a year from now and think that the numbers are going to be relevant or accurate or whatever. You should be regularly checking the market to see if there's any trends, making these items be considerably more or less valuable, and also look at other items that I might have left off here. This isn't a comprehensive list. It's just a smattering of stuff that I found over the last week that I threw into my spreadsheet. Now, I know a lot of people are going to want to have access to my spreadsheet, but again, given the fact that I just threw it together for this research, it's not pretty. The values change so often. There's so many different ways to actually value these items. Honestly, it's not worth the headache of giving everybody access. So if you'd like this information, I'm showing you guys now, just check out my website and you can grab the image, and it's going to be something that'll be decent as a quick reference in the future while you guys are raiding and looting. So I'm going to leave you with a few final heuristics that you can take away from this to go along with this image. Anytime that you can take, the big backpacks and nest them, as well as, nice large chest rigs, without it being too risky, you should. For the most value per slot from looting players and raiders, you're going to want to take off things like suppressors, lasers, lights, any single slot rails that can hold, an optic and a flashlight, things like that. If they have large capacity magazines for like the AK-74 or the M4 filled with the rare ammo like a Golnik or 995, you're going to want to take those as well. Stuff your bags and rigs with as much as that as possible. Aiming for a bag full of items that are at least 15,000 rubles per slot will get you over 500,000 rubles per raid, not even counting any of the treasure items that you might find and stash in your gamma. Now, I've got a bunch more science incoming that I'm going to be showing you guys, comparing risk and reward of different types of kits, looting methods, strategies, keys versus no keys, mags cases in the gamma versus not. I'll hopefully get that out soon. But in the meantime, please go check out QuattroAce on Twitch and on YouTube. Follow him for the education you will undoubtedly get for free. And last but not least, if you find a LEDX or a vertex, gamma that shit faster than a scav can black out your Oh, wait. That joke doesn't really work anymore, does it? Fuck.